So we stopped here in the last class. So this is about the generation of the Fibonacci series using recursion. So this is a recursive definition of the Fibonacci series. So the series is like this. It starts with 0, then there is a 1. After that, uh, the next numbers in the series are generated as follows. So it's like this. So from the third number onwards, the numbers are generated by summing up the previous two numbers. So this one is obtained by summing up this 0 and this one. This 2 is obtained by summing up this one and this one, like this. It goes on. It is an infinite series. And it consists of only non-negative integers. So for n equal to 0, so n is the nth, n number denotes the nth number, or the nth term in the sequence. So for n equal to 0, fib n, like which represents the nth term in a sequence, it is 0. For n equal to 1, it's 1. So these two are by definition. For n greater than 1, it is like this. The expression is like this: Fibonacci n, fib n minus 1 plus fib n minus 2. So I'm sure you have gone through this before. We have been generating this series in any programming course, right? So people who have done programming course, before this, I believe all of you have done. So Fibonacci series is something which we have to do, right? But there is a very interesting background of this Fibonacci series. So okay, let's not delve too much deep, but we can say that Fibonacci series is a very interesting series. Like it has captured the imagination of many mathematicians. Like Fibonacci series is used in analyzing the complexity of algorithms, some of the algorithms. Fibonacci series can be used to generate the Pascal's triangle, which because you see that it follows a very similar logic. Some part of the Pascal's triangle can also be generated by using the Fibonacci series. And these are all mathematical factors. There are some other important factors, like in nature you'll find this series appearing on many occasions. Like there is a number called basically golden number associated with the Fibonacci series. So so it is in a way represents the infinite sum of the Fibonacci series, if I'm not wrong, and 1 is to that number. So that number is something like square root of 5 minus 1 by something. It is not a rational number, so it contains a square root. So so 1 is to that is called the golden ratio, and this particular ratio is basically ubiquitous in many of the patterns which are observed in nature, like many of the floral patterns, the arrangement of petals and follow this. Even many of the birds use this ratio. Not exactly this ratio. There can be certain patterns generated using the golden ratio. So some of the birds use this pattern. We can consider some error in that, but more or less on the basically roughly speaking, they follow a spiral path which is proportional in a way of speaking to to the golden ratio. Even the arrangement of the shell, the shell growth of many animals which have shells, all right. So they also follow this kind of patterns. Even for the bees and for the rabbits, the rate of multiplication by reproduction, can also follow this Fibonacci series. Even Fibonacci series, all this or basically this golden ratio, and it has been observed that to optimize the sun beam or the exposure to the sun rays, which are important for photosynthesis, it has been found that the angle between two branches, which contains the basically the leaves, right, uh, are approximately equal to the golden angle. It is an angle which which can be derived from the golden ratio. So such that one particular branch is not directly under the other. So they are, they actually follow this golden angle, and that is, believed to optimize the exposure of the sun rays. Exposure to the sun rays. So this is some background, but there are many, mathematical implications to it. So how do we, go about calculating this? Like I talked about the factorial example, right? So in the factorial example, you see that, if I can go back to the picture, see that at every step I am subdividing the problem. What do I mean by subdivision? It is basically reducing the value of n. What is n? N is the size of input, right? So here input, the size of input is basically subdivided, using other versions of the same function. But here the subdivision was restricted to one such instance, one basically new instance with a smaller value of n. But in this case, the subdivision is for two different versions of the function. So if we take an example, so how do we calculate Fibonacci 4, FIB4? We sum up Fibonacci 3 and Fibonacci 2, right? So how do we get Fibonacci 3? We sum up Fibonacci 2 and Fibonacci 1. So here we have reached what condition? The base condition. So here we know the value, right? And this is Fibonacci 2. So from Fibonacci 2, we subdivide the problem to Fibonacci 1 and Fibonacci 0. So these two are also the base conditions. By base condition, I mean we don't need to call another function with a reduced value of n. So here, from here, we basically do the backtracking, or we move from basically bottom to up. So you see that it is, in a way of speaking, it is similar to basically decentralization of power, which is done in every successful administrative body, right? So for example, take the example of the ICER admission system. So so here, these are the instances of the same function, right? So in that case, so I'm talking about basically modular programming in general. So the bigger problem, that is, you need to provide admission to a bright student, which you all are, right? So how do we go about it? So it has several parts, right? So maybe the most basic part can be to take the admission form filled up by the student. Then it goes up to the next stage where someone uses a criteria for selection. For example, you should get this much marks in HS or something like that. Then there will be some exam, right? So, and finally there will be an interview, for example. So there will be a I mean, there will be some recruitment. So the tasks are subdivided into different modules. It starts from the base level. By base level, I mean the problem is simple, so that it can be done, I mean, manually. So you can consider, you can basically compare it to, I mean, manual submission of the form. So now the forms are I mean, online, but the degree of complexity of the problem is not that much, right? So it is so, but from, I mean, from the simpler level, um, the problem ascends to the height of complexity. So the problem gets more complicated as we go up in this hierarchy. So, I mean, very similar thing is happening here, and it is true for I mean top down, I mean modular programming in general. So see, on a lighter note, all the components in the system are very important. So I am basically I'm not a communist, but you see that, I mean, all the people involved in the system are important, right? So people at this level to this level, all, I mean, everyone would contribute to the system. Similarly here. So though, I mean, Fibonacci series, this particular operation is trivial, but without this, I mean, trivial operation, it is not possible to solve. I mean, Fibonacci 4. So I mean, this is a very simple example, right? So 4 is a very small number. So we are looking at complexities where this becomes 1000, for example. Then the problem would have been really complicated. But in that case also, basically we would have started from a very simple level, and we do this, I mean, basically deconstruction. I mean, this is the this is the, I mean, decomposition, and this is basically the bottom up direction is a recomposition, or basically reconstruction. So here, from Fibonacci 1, we get, so I mean, FIB1 is 1, right? The value is 1. So it goes up to Fibonacci 2. At this stage, I mean, Fibonacci 2 cannot be calculated because it is waiting for this value, Fibonacci 0, which is 0. So it goes back. So it gets 0 from this subpart and 1 from this subpart. So it uses the basically recomposition operator, which is in this case plus. So in factorial, it was a multiplication. So in this case plus. So it basically adds 1 and 0. So Fibonacci 2 is now 1. Fibonacci 1. So this is a base condition again. So Fibonacci 1 is 1. So these two values is 1 and 1 goes up to calculate, I mean, Fibonacci 3, which is 1 plus 1, 2. So it goes on like this. So for I mean, Fibonacci 2, we already know Fibonacci 2 is 1, and these get transferred to, I mean, Fibonacci 4. The control basically returns from Fibonacci 3 and Fibonacci 2 to construct Fibonacci 4. This goes on. So there is, so I mean, although this is a very popular way of solving, I mean, this particular problem, that is finding the Fibonacci, I mean, I'm calculating the Fibonacci series. But you see that this kind of methods do have some disadvantage, which I mentioned in the last class also. See that when we calculate Fibonacci 3, we are calculating Fibonacci 2 and I mean, Fibonacci 3 and Fibonacci 2, right? So let's assume that the system calculates this part first. So we have Fibonacci 3. Then suppose after we have the value of Fibonacci 3, the system is calculating Fibonacci 2. But do we need, do we really need to do this? So while calculating Fibonacci 3, we have already calculated Fibonacci 2, right? And while calculating Fibonacci 2, we already, I mean, had calculated Fibonacci 1 and Fibonacci 0. So this part is also not required. So that's a different issue. I mean, that's a digression. So So that is a part of efficient programming. We can, I mean, reduce the time complexity by basically removing all the redundancies. So that comes under a different paradigm that is called basically dynamic programming. But I'm not discussing that in this course, but you should bear this in mind that there can be several other ways of doing it. There are other ways of doing it. But since I am discussing this in the light of recursion, so here is the construct. But you must be aware of the pros and cons of all the methods. Right. Let's go ahead. So let's look at the implementation of this code. So let's look at the solution. So here, so there can be other ways of doing it, but I found this to be the easiest one. So here, to calculate, I mean, Fibonacci, to generate the sequence for n equal to 10, this seems to be a very popular way. So I mean, there is a for loop from I equal to 0 to n. So it generates from 0 to flip n. So there are basically n plus 1 numbers in the sequence. So every time I call for generating the ith number, I call this a recursive function. So the recursive function is like this. So I think it is quite simple. By this time, you would have had some idea of how to do this. So this is a base condition, and this is also a base. So there are two base conditions, right? So for n equal to 0, we return 0, and for n equal to 1, we return 1. For the other for the numbers which are greater than these two, okay, there is a problem. What will happen if n is less than 0, right? So you could have kept a check. So here I have not done that, but possibly you can stop. You can basically return something else. So let's not go there. Or else we are calculating this. So it becomes so easy and so very convenient to represent the problem. Though this problem is not very easy, right? So it is quite. I mean, it can get complicated if the value of n is large, but due to this recursive definition, it is becoming so very convenient to handle it. Okay, so this is the okay. So let's run this code. So it gives the right output. 0, 1, 1, 1 plus 1 is 2, 2 plus 1 is 3, 3 plus 2 is 5, like this. It's simple enough. Once you have had, so once you have constructed what is the base condition and what is basically the recursive condition and how to return the values at each stage, it is basically a cakewalk, right? It's basically there is nothing in it. So let's also look at the iterative version. So it is like this. So you're taking f0 as 0 and f1 as 1. Then from n to 2 to n, I'm doing this calculation. Every time I am basically adding the previous two numbers. As simple as that. So this was about recursion. Recursion to solve Fibonacci sequence. I hope this is simple enough for you to understand. So here there is a code. I think there is this, no, it's okay, I think. So this was about recursive definition of the Fibonacci sequence. All right, so there can be several other problems which can be solved using recursion. We will discuss some more problems, but after I introduce pointers to you. That I will do after I introduce pointers. because you would need pointers to solve some of the problems. So it's better to first introduce pointers and then, I mean, basically go about it. Another problem which is popularly solved using recursion, and also without I mean using recursion, but it is a good problem to be discussed while we are covering this. So that is that, I mean, that is the Euclid's algorithm for calculating GCD. What is GCD? GCD is the greatest common I mean divisor. There can be several other names of GCD, like I think it is equivalent to HCF also. So it is basically the largest integer. So GCD of two integers, m and n, is the largest integer which divides both of them. So there can be several ways of doing it. So possibly what you have also done in your school days is as follows. You basically would have done something like this, right? So let me show you how to do that. Okay. What's this? Okay, let's see. New. Oh gosh. How to open this? Yeah, let me try. So I'm so inexperienced in Windows, you see. Okay. I used to do Windows. Okay. File new. I used to do Windows when I was doing my masters. New file. How to open a new file? Home. Control. Does Control N work? Yeah. Okay. Okay. So it is something like this. I'm sure you have done this before. So you have to do something like this. So this is a number, say 25, and this is a number, say 15. It's too bad. So what would you have done? Here you would have found out the uh, the smallest numbers by which you would have divided these two, right? So 1 2 is of no use. 3 4 and 5, maybe from 5 you would have divided this, right? So you know, basically how to do it. So what exactly did you do? You are actually finding out all the prime factors which are common to both of them. So here I think it will be 5 only. 5 and this is 3, right? So basically it boils down to find out all the prime factors which may also repeat, all the prime factors of which these two numbers are basically composed of. So you see that there is a theorem in the study of integers that a number is either prime or is it composite. If it is composite, it can be written by basically written as a product of a finite number of prime factors, basically prime numbers. So that is true for all the numbers. So basically, you would have calculated. I mean, you would have broken down each number into product of all the prime numbers, uh, and you would have found out the numbers which are common to both of them. That's what you did. But imagine if the number is extremely large, if the numbers are quite large, and they can also be prime by themselves, right? You can take a large enough, I mean, two large prime numbers, then it can take substantial time to find out those factors. So substantial time and substantial number of steps, where each step will be division, right? So since you don't know which are the factors, you have to consider all the prime numbers. So basically you have to generate all the prime numbers which are basically smaller than, I mean, these two numbers, and see whether it is these numbers are basically divisible. So though it looks to be uh, an attractive method, and I mean easy enough and intuitive method in the pedagogical parlance, but when it comes to um, I mean efficiency, that is basically reducing the number of steps in terms of division, something else, I mean, needed to be done. So Euclid's algorithm is supposed to be uh, a much more efficient solution. So that's why, I mean, Euclid's algorithm is more basically more popularly used. But obviously, you can write a program to find out all the factors, and you can also do that. I mean, for basically smaller numbers, it doesn't make uh, I mean too much of a fuss. So what the algorithm is? So actual algorithm was, I mean, written is a much more complicated fashion. So this is, I mean, written. This was written in the Donald Knuth book, The Art of Computer Programming. So I've used that definition only. I mean, this definition is used, I mean, widely. So the first step is, I suppose we want to find the GCD of two, I mean, positive integers m and n. The first step is we have to divide m by n and let r be the basically remainder. Not remainder, remainder, sorry. Step 2 is you check if this r is 0. If this r is 0, then you end. So, and the answer is n, right? If this step is, so this condition is not true, then you come to step 3. What you do there, you assign n to m and assign r to n and go to step 1. So you continue this until r becomes 0, and r will it can be proven that r will become 0. I mean, however large the numbers m and n can be, uh, I mean, there will be. This algorithm is, I mean, proven to converge. So, what is the basic motivation behind doing this? So, it doesn't sound very, I mean, intuitive, right? So, what is exactly happening inside? So, every time, so this also can be proven that when you reach r equal to 0, then at that time n would have divided m, right? You are dividing. So these m and n are not the original m and n which you with which you started. So this is some intermediate m, but at that point of time this n would have divided m perfectly, because that is why this remainder is 0. So this follows the remainder theorem. I'm sure you know what remainder theorem is. So I mean, to basically wrap it up. So if a is a number, so it's like this. If a is a number, it can be written like this. Sorry for my bad handwriting. Q0 and say B plus R. It can be written like this. Okay, so R has to be less than B, right? And R can be greater than or equal to 0, and R is basically less than or equal to B. So I'm dividing A by B. So A is the number which is getting divided. I'm dividing it by B. So this is basically the dividend. This is a divisor or divisor, whatever it is. So Q is a quotient. So B into Q0. You are so when you write this actually. So this is the number A. This is the number B. This is Q0. And this is okay. So this just like this. So this is popularly called the basically the remainder theorem. Is that the name? Yes. Yeah. So it is, and every time this M and N are getting changed. So when R becomes 0, which means that I mean intermediate value of M is getting divided. It is perfectly divisible by N, that is there will be no remainder. So this term will be 0. You can prove by back calculation very easily that so so you can write this. So suppose if we can write A is equal to Q, say Q1 B, this, if you can write this, then basically you can say that B basically divides A. And if this one is so I mean this is the theorem, and you see that in this so if N, so N divides M, the basically the intermediate values M and N. So it can be shown that N is the GCD of this M and N intermediate value. But by back calculation, you can easily show that if we talk about the original M and N, basically with which you started, this N is the GCD of the original M and N also, because this N will divide both the original M and N's. This you can prove. I mean, and the proof is very simple. So this is the proof for validity or the proof of correctness of the GCD algorithm. So this is some background, but let's go back to the algorithm. So so this is the algorithm. So what we do, we first look at the iterative implementation. So every time, what do? We divide A by B, right? So we calculate the remainder, and we set we assign B the remainder. So we store the remainder in B and B in A. So now A becomes B and B becomes remainder, and this goes on until B is not equal to 0. When B becomes 0, then A becomes the answer, because you will, I mean, if you I mean watch it carefully, you will find that this is the case. So what is the trick in solving this? Every time you divide A by B, you store B in A and you store the remainder in B. So now with this logic, I want you to write the recursive version. Please write the recursive version of this, but I will show you the solution shortly. But I will give you 5 minutes to do that. Okay, so let me show you the solution. So the what nakshatra, right? Nakshatra showed us is also correct. Of course, that is he did the check just one step I mean, before what I am going to show you. But that is, I mean, that is. I would like to say that uh, basically, I mean, adheres to the solution actual solution of the Euclid's algorithm more, but I think this is a bit. I mean, this solution which I'm going to show you goes just one step ahead. So, so I showed you this algorithm, right? This, I mean, this thing. So every time what's happening? So I'm passing A and B, right? And B, as I mentioned, A is replaced by B and B is replaced by A, this B. So when A modulo B becomes 0, then basically B is the answer, but I can go one step ahead. I can go one step ahead. I can wait till B is 0, and then I can return A. That is also correct. I can show you the output maybe. Yeah, so what is happening is 1071 and 462, 21 will be the GCD. So first it is dividing this 462 is dividing 1071, 147 is a remainder. So 147, so B goes to A and the remainder goes to 147. Sorry, 147 goes to the remainder. Then again, I mean, this goes on. So 21 is the remainder when 147 divides 462. So the remainder goes to B and 147 is A, right? So at this stage only, I can see that 21 divides 147, right? So that's what Bailang did. Sorry, Nakshat. So Bailang is your surname, right? So that's what.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so that's what Nakshatra did. So he returned from this point. So here, I mean, this follows the Euclid's algorithm in a more dedicated way. So 21 is now dividing 147. You can see that it is 21 into 7 is 147, right? But I am going another step. I mean, again doing the same thing, and I am waiting till this part is 0. So this B has come to A when this B becomes 0. So this is same as doing this. So 21 is the output. So you see that in this case, we wanted to calculate the GCD of these two numbers, but we actually came to this part where 21 is dividing 147. So we need something which divides these two numbers, right? But you can prove by backtracking that this 21 not only divides these two numbers, it divides these two numbers, it also divides, I mean, these two numbers. So the algorithm is like that. So all the pairs of numbers generated by all the iterations goes on like this until you get a B which divides A. So that B will divide all the pairs. So it is a GCD of all the pairs. So I mean preceding it. So that's the beauty of the algorithm. That's why this algorithm is widely used and it is highly efficient. You see that how many divisions do you need? Otherwise, you would have had to divide this into all the I mean constituents prime factors, right? So that would have been much more interpretable. But this is much more efficient to the best of my understanding. Okay, so 1 minute to go. Maybe we can stop here and we can continue the discussion in the next class. So in the next week, I am planning to start pointers. I will finish this, I mean, recursion in the next class, and I will discuss some structures because structure will be important for you to solve the problem.